So you had no experience being outside of the country. You have a 1-year-old daughter with you, and you don't speak any Mandarin,
Yes.
and you still went.
Yes, absolutely, because it just seemed like an opportunity to serve God and to do what He had called us to do.
About 80% of Americans don't get their weekly recommended exercise. Let's admit it, we're out of shape, but we're also out of shape spiritually. If I don't exercise my faith weakens. I start not wanting to pray, not wanting to read the Bible. But if I exercise my faith strengthens, and so does my desire for God. Too often, we go to church to get fed a sermon. You see, in the United States, we're not spiritually starved, we're spiritually obese. Too often, we go to church and we eat up a sermon without exercising its message. Let's learn from my friend Troy, who exercised his faith by doing some mission work in China. Check it out. Okay, Troy, I want to hear about your experience with outreach
Sure.
and mission work. And so tell me about like your experience with China. Why did you go over there? How did that all start?
Just wanting to serve Christ with others and tell other people about Jesus Christ that we didn't think had the opportunities. We live in America. There are churches on all the corners. You can go to any store and you can buy a Bible. Like, you can find out about Jesus Christ if you live here. But there are other parts of the world where that access to Jesus is not as easy. And even if they could get a hold of Jesus Christ, there's a lot more social pressures, cultural pressures not to. They don't know any other Christians, and there's not really a desire to. They don't know why they would even want to do that if they could. With places like China, there may be Christians in the area, but they still have a long ways to go before Christianity is really well known.
Did you have any fears or doubts or second guesses about leaving the United States and going to some place, particularly China, which is not always, nice to Christians?
Absolutely, the whole way through. There were many times where we were like, "Are we doing this? I think we're doing this. This is going to be kind of intimidating or scary." And then that flight over was so nerve-wracking. I had never left the country before, and my wife had left the country, but not since she was a baby, when she was literally a little child. So neither of us had flown internationally in our adult lives, and we were taking our 1-year-old daughter to China. And the whole way through, I mean, as we got on flights and as soon as like the English started to disappear around you and you're like, oh my goodness, if I make a mistake, like I don't know what's going to happen. We have all of our life belongings in like 9 bags.
So you had no experience being outside of the country. You have a 1-year-old daughter with you, and you don't speak any Mandarin,
Yes.
and you still went.
Yes, absolutely. Because it just seemed like an opportunity to serve God and to do what He had called us to do. And it didn't matter.
So you were in China teaching students English,
Hmm.
and in exchange, you got to teach them the gospel.
Well, and I was a third grade teacher, so we were teaching all the core subjects, science, math, English, whatever, in English. And then they would also take Chinese subjects alongside of it so they could learn both sides. But so they would basically take in third grade twice, once in their own language and once in English. And at the same time, it was a Christian school. And we were not openly Christian, but we were as open about it as you could possibly be. And that opportunity was, if we teach you, if you come to our school, you send our students to our school, you will learn English and get proficient and be able to, a lot of them would want to send their kids to America down the road to get some more education. And so this was a great opportunity for them to do that. But on the same time, it was like, but here we can also teach you about God and the Bible, and we would do a worship nights and stuff like that too.
Okay, so tell me any like wild, crazy stories from China.
Sure. I think it's important to note, like, so when we talk about China, it's a communist country. The churches and stuff are illegal there. They do allow state-run churches, and they do know Christians are there. So they're not fooled by anything. They know there's a very large house church presence. There are these black cars in China that drive down the street, and they have these tinted windows, and they're big black SUVs, and everyone knows if you've seen one of those, pull your car over. Like, we'd be driving, and not all parts of China. Every part of China is very different, by the way. But in this part of China we were at, we would drive down the road, and like if we were in a taxi and that car came over, it would just pull over, and there would be no sirens or alarms or anything. They would just all make way so that car could pass so that they didn't have to wait for anybody. And those cards would sometimes show up at our school. And when they would show up, they would kind of sit there and wait a minute. And like they would pull us in and they would have us teachers go hide in a room. They had us one time, the first time, hide in a closet. They put like a shelf in front of it. They told us to turn our phones off. And they said, just wait, we'll knock when you can come out. And the whole goal of it was you're not allowed technically to teach here, but they know you're here teaching. They have cameras all over every street. They know exactly where you are and what you're doing here. But if they see you, then they have to ask you. If they ask you, you might not answer the questions right, and now they have to take you in for questioning, and it becomes a whole big ordeal. But if they don't see you, if you're not there technically, then they don't have to ask you any questions, and then they can just talk to the people who run the school and the people who run the school, and these people can kind of work things out so that whatever's going on, it doesn't have to look like a problem. And they would ask some questions there, and these people can handle it. We lower people couldn't. So they just wanted us out of the way, so they put us in the closet. And it could be kind of intimidating. I remember one time somebody came running to my class and like a drone just flew by and took a bunch of pictures. They need to hide us again, so we'd go down into a closet.
Going by the windows.
You would just have people said they just saw a black drone just kind of pass through all the windows. It went by basically, and not 10 minutes later, a bunch of black SUVs pull up, and all these people in these garbs and uniforms with these communist, red things on their arms would walk into the school, and we were all put into a closet again.
What did you learn most about your trip overseas?
I learned that our faith is very real. So when I lived in a country that is, not a Christian country by any standards, there's tons of Buddhist temples, tons of Taoist temples, tons of all those things going on. And then there's a ton of people who just, they believe a lot in like these kind of superstitions and ideas, but they don't really take faith all that seriously at all either. And I thought to myself, how does Christianity do in an environment like that? And actually, we do really well in that environment. Christianity does have the answers to a lot of life's questions. A lot of people are living harder lives because they don't accept God and His truth into their life. And I was like, no, our faith really does stand the test of the practice. It's not just something that does well in a Christian country. When you believe it and live it out, it answers questions and helps people out all around the world. There are so many families and people who are struggling with abusive wives, or they're struggling with
abusive wives.
They're struggling with abusive spouses, or they're struggling with alcoholism. There was all these questions and things like that I saw, and I was like, no, Christianity has the answer to these questions, and these other religions don't stand up. And there is a reason why our faith is real, and our faith is spreading in places even like China, because despite the fact that it's not a Christian country and it wasn't Christianized on any level, it's still doing very well there despite all that persecution, because our faith is real and it answers life's questions and it gives us hope, and it does transform who we are. And the people who come to believe in Christ do change. They go from being these broken sinners with no hope to still sinners, but they have hope and they have a change and they create fruit in their life. And I was like, no, you can see it, and you can see it when you live overseas. And the other thing too is I got this idea in my head that, oh man, different cultures make us very different. We're almost unrelatable to each other. I got over there, I was like, not really. They still drink coffee like we do. We all like to eat 3 meals a day. We all hang out and we talk sports. They talked about soccer more than football, but it was the same. We're all, in a lot of ways, we're a lot of the same things. And there may be huge cultural things and maybe huge language barriers between us, but we're all the same people. We want most of the same things. And I realized like there's not nearly as much differences between us as I thought in my head there was going to be. I thought it was going to be so hard learning all these things, but really most people were very friendly, very nice. They wanted to kind of get to know you, and they'd ask you questions, and they were conversational with me, and I was conversational with them, and I was like, this stuff is not as scary as you think it is. I talked a lot about what was scary in China, and almost all of that has to do with the government of China. The people of China, there was nothing like that. The people of China were happy to see you. They'd be happy to have you in your store. They wanted to chat. Where are you from? And you'd say, I'm from this place. And they would be like, oh, Kansas. Yes, I know Wizard of Oz. I have a friend in Chicago. And I'm like, yeah, not the same, but it's fine. It's good. No worries. I mean, it's just the same things they wanted that we wanted. They want a little extra sleep. They want to go on vacation. There's no huge difference between people. And that was really important because, again, I had just been you going overseas, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be so different there. It is, but it also really isn't.
So how did going to China stretch you, like culturally and your awareness of different ethnicities?
Yeah, I read a quote before we went over, or actually after a while I was there, it said, when you don't travel, you live and see one page of a really big book. And when you start to travel, you start to see the other pages and the other chapters of the book. But by traveling, you start to see some of the other cultures and the other stories. You start to learn some of their histories. You start to learn what they're going through, who their leaders are, what's happening over there.
So do you think it helps you realize that, we aren't the center of the universe in America and that this world is bigger?
Absolutely. No, and I always tell people I kind of feel like I give off a vibe like you should never go to China. I do think if you can get the chance to go on a week or two vacation, go see China. There's something about when we were on the Great Wall of China. I mean, that Great Wall of China is two that we were on was like 2 or 3 thousand years old. You would visit temples and they're like, yeah, this temple was put into a mountain like 5,000 years ago, and it is very, very old. And you go, wow. When I visit history museums in the Midwest, they're like, this wagon's 100 years old, guys. I'm like, there's just such a huge difference. You suddenly realize, oh man, I feel really little and little,
Yeah.
very young in comparison to this world we live in. And I realize, the United States of America is important, but we're just one country of a bunch of countries. And
Do you think mission work um, should be required of everybody, of every Christian in some way, or do you feel like it's not for everybody? What's your answer to that?
I think mission work is required. I mean, you were called to tell people, there was no go therefore in all the nations and tell them if you want, or if I think you're special in that area to do it. Everyone is required to tell others about Jesus Christ. Does that mean everybody needs to move overseas or go visit another country? I don't know if that means that everybody should do that, but I think if you have an opportunity, you should always try to take the opportunity to go and do what you can. If you think that God is telling you, I need to go and do something, there's a people group or somebody you want to spend time with, and you think God is sending you to them, or even maybe where you're at, you're just wanting to reach out to a neighbor across the street or something like that, trust in Him, rely on Him, and then I would say, go.
Like you said, like you can even go across your street and have mission work with a neighbor or a family member. And I think sometimes maybe going across the street will build up a courage to where you can go overseas, or vice versa. Sometimes if you go overseas, or like I went to Honduras, you come back and you're like, "Well, I did that. Like, of course I can do something locally." It almost like emboldens you to do more because you pushed yourself beyond your comfort zone and increased your courage, right?
Yeah, I think taking steps of faith, God rewards you with more faith. And so when you take those steps of faith, I'm going to show love to a neighbor, or I'm going to show love overseas, or whatever I'm doing to grow in Him, He rewards you like, good. And now you're even more about what I'm doing. And the other thing, too, is it really puts in your eyes this mindset of like, every person I meet is not just fast food worker or a waitress or a hotel person or just my boss or whatever, whoever your mind might be of like who these people are. You start to see like, no, they're all those things, but they're also souls, and they are going somewhere someday, and I need to be about helping them. They're a soul probably in need of the gospel right now, and they're a soul that's going to need the gospel later on, just as much too. I need to make sure that when I look at people, talk with people, interact with people, I'm not just seeing them as, how do I get this thing from you? You're not just, how do I get my order from you, or how do I, you're checking out my book or something at the store. You are also a soul, and you have a purpose and desire why you're here. Are you living that out, and how can I help bring that out to you? And I would say to anybody, ask God to use you where you are. Be open to Him using where you are, surrendering and praying to Him, and quite frankly begging Him to be used by you. And there's no excuse, there's nothing that you have that you can't give over to Him that He can't still use. And that may not mean you're going to China, may not mean you're going overseas at all. But I promise you that, like, if you look at the Bible and you look at the people God chose, He is not bothered by your weaknesses at all. There's no excuse that keeps Him out of using you. It really is just a matter of, will I trust God enough with it? And will I give Him that space to move in my life? And will I seek Christ enough in my heart? Or will instead I let other things get in the way? I may say, oh, it's this excuse over here, but I secretly know it's this sin or something like that. But if you're serious about your faith and you're serious about being Christ-like and living for holiness and loving others, He will definitely use you. Just trust Him to do it.
Troy put his faith in action by doing mission work in China. And you can see it from the enthusiasm in his voice and in the light in his eye. Do you have that enthusiasm? I'll be honest, sometimes I don't. And I think we need to put our faith in action to get some of that enthusiasm. We have to do it to feel it. Instead of being fat and happy, we need to focus on being lean and holy, and that ultimately creates joy. So here are some ideas for putting your faith into action. Offer to help a friend with something they're working on. Invite a neighbor over and do something they enjoy. Serve in your church where your gifts are utilized. Check up on the elderly in your church. Invite someone to church or a church function. Pray for someone who wronged you. Serve at a local charity. Donate what you don't need. Give as a family to a charity or multiple charities that you all agree on. Watch a Christian movie with your family and then take 15 minutes to talk about how it relates to your lives. Sponsor, foster, or adopt a child. Go on a mission trip. It's time to get moving, Christians. Let's put our faith into action. Action that promotes truth without harshness, tenderness without weakness, and godly masculinity without apology.